The Definitive Illustrated Encyclopedia of Jazz and Blues, Audiobook, Part 2. First things first, I am recording in my bedroom, like all my previous recordings. So it's very much possible that you will hear a lot of unwanted noises. I apologize for that, and I'll try to keep this recording as professional as possible. Thank you. Now let's come to the key artists of the early years of jazz and blues. Kid Ory. Kid Ory was born in La Place, Louisiana in 1886. He learned trombone and led a group of young musicians, the Woodland Band, which he took to New Orleans around 1908. He played with veteran jazzmen in the following years and gained a reputation as a powerful ensemble player and inspired soloist, especially when the blues were concerned. In his teens, Ory worked at Pete Lala's Cafe and developed a partnership with Joe King Oliver, the top trumpet man and leader in the city. The Ory Oliver bands showcased rising talents including the Dodds brothers, Jimmy Nunn, and Bill Johnson. When Oliver left for Chicago, Ory migrated to Los Angeles, where he assembled a group of musicians who followed him throughout his long career. Guitarist Arthur Bud Scott, trumpeter Thomas Mutt Carey, and clarinist Wade Wheely were all Ory loyalists. Even during the periods in which the band was beset by feuds, later stalwarts included pianist Albert Wesley Wilson and drummer Minor Ram Hall. In 1922, Ory's band made history as the first African-American New Orleans jazz band to record sides from the Tiny Sunshine label in LA. They accompanied blues singers and made instrumentals including a trick trombone specialty, Ory's Creole trombone. Ory left for Chicago in the mid-1920s, becoming a star with King Dixie Syncopatas and with Louis Armstrong's Hot 5 and Hot 7. With Oliver and Armstrong, Ory became the model for the traditional tailgate players of the era. Tailgate playing describes a jazz trombone style in which the instrument fulfills a largely rhythmic and riff-tagging role beneath the more melodic cornets and trumpets. This remained the norm until virtuoso players like Jack Teagarden came along and reinvented the trombone as a lead instrument. The name itself derives from the trombone player's position at the back of the bandwagons where the instrument's slide would not be in the way of the other musicians. Ory also recorded with the New Orleans Wanderers and the New Orleans Bootblacks, as well as participating in Jelly Roll Morton's brilliant first-read Hot Peppers recordings. In the 1930s, Ory, like many veteran jazzmen, found work too scarce to continue as a musician. He returned to California, where he was traced by Orson Welles in the early 1940s and brought back to prominence via radio and recordings. A central figure in the revival of New Orleans-style jazz in the 1940s to 1960s. Ory led bands in California, touring and recording prolifically with many old cohorts to the end of his days in 1973. You will find the links of his songs and recordings in the description box. Charley Patton. Although not really the founder of the Delta Blues as one reissue album title touted, Charley Patton more than anyone defined not only the genre but also the image of the hard, living, rambling Delta bluesman, leaving trouble in his wake as he rolled from plantation to plantation and woman to woman. His rough vocal timbre combined with the poor sound quality of the few surviving Paramount 78s he recorded may have caused some listeners to regard him as primitive. Guitarists such as John Fahey, who wrote the first book on Patton, have been awed by both the power and the complexity of his music. Under the influence of an old guitarist named Henry Sloan on the Dockery plantation, Patton, probably born in 1891 in Bolton, developed into the most famous and formidable Delta bluesman of the early 20th century. By his biographers' accounts, he was leading the way long before his belated recording debut in 1929. Patton, of mixed black, white, and Native American ancestry, was an animated performer who clowned with the guitar and beat on the instrument for percussive effects. He taught or influenced guitarists such as Tommy Johnson, Willie Brown, Roebuck Pops, Staples, and Howlin. Wolfe, during his stays in the Dockery area and later further north in the Delta, added Sondhaus, Robert Johnson, and others to the list. Tommy Johnson used some of Patton's themes on his own Victor recording debut in 1928. Patton's first Paramount disc, Pony Blues or Banty Roster Blues, was his biggest hit. His recorded repertoire drew from traditional black folk songs, white pop tunes, religious songs, dance pieces, and frolics, as well as his own creative wellspring as a composer and storyteller. His records are noteworthy for his descriptions of tropical events such as the Great Mississippi River Flood of 1927, and for the local lore and real-life characters that he worked into songs such as Tom Risen Blues and High Sheriff Blues. He died in 1934, but his influence persists into the 21st century. Bob Dylan included a tribute song, High Water Everywhere, for Charley Patton on his 2001 album Love and Theft. He also said, "If I was going to record for just my pleasure, I would only record Charley Patton songs." The songs and information related to Charley Patton will be given in the description box. Some of his classic songs are Banty Roaster Blues, Down the Dirt Road, High Water Everywhere, Pony Blues, Screaming and Hollerin', The Blues, Shake It and Break It, Tom Russon Blues, Dry Well Blues, High Sheriff Blues, Stone Pony Blues. Ma Rainey, or the mother of the blues, had been singing the blues for some 2 decades before she commenced her influential series of recordings for the Paramount label in 1923. She even laid claim to naming the music the blues after hearing the singing of a young girl in Missouri in 1902, where Rainey was performing with a tent show. Born as Gertrude Pidgret on 26 April 1866, Rainey began performing in her native Columbus, Georgia, as a schoolgirl, before joining a number of traveling revues and minstrel shows, working southern theaters, circuses, carnivals, and other venues. She teamed with William Parr Rainey, whom she married in 1904, to perform as Rainey and Rainey, Assassinators of the Blues. Known for her flamboyant stage shows, jeweled attire, and colorful lifestyle, she was already one of the best-known blues singers in the South when recruited by Paramount. Rainey helped to shape the character, style, and presentation of blues in its formative years, and her role and stature in the blues genre escalated during her brief but prolific career from 1923 to 28. Her records were noted not only for the powerful majesty of her singing, but also for the variety of outstanding accompaniment by acclaimed jazz, blues, and jug band musicians. Ma Rainey possessed an earlier, more down-home southern style than most of the early blues queens, and was effective working with bluesmen such as Tampa Red, Georgia Tom Dorsey, and Blind Blake, as well with other jazz musicians. She retired in 1935 and died 4 years later, but her influence is evident in the work of her protege. Among Rainey's classics were the original version of C.C. Ryder, Boo Weevil Blues, Moonshine Blues, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Some of her most famous and significant songs are Madam Ma Rainey, Boo Weevil Blues, Barrel House Blues, Shavum Rye Blues, C.C. Rider Blues, Toad Frog Blues, Blues O Blues, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Yonder Comes the Blues, Mountain Jack Blues. You will find the links of the songs and information about Ma Rainey in the description box. Clerence Williams. Clerence Williams was born in 1898 in Plaquemine, Louisiana, migrating to New Orleans in the teens to play piano in the district, and began a long career as a composer, band leader, and musical promoter. He was the manager of two early jazz venues, the Big 25 Club and Pete Lala's Cafe, hiring the best musicians in the city. He opened a publishing house with Armand J. Pyron, the leader of a popular dance band operating at the Lake Pontchartrain resorts. In 1919, he partnered with the savvy publisher-writer Spencer Williams. They gathered, compiled, and copyrighted musical numbers that were floating in the air around the dance halls, bars, and brothels of the city, publishing such endearing mega hits such as None of My Jelly Roll and Royal Garden Blues. Williams left for Chicago around 1917, pursuing publishing and becoming an agent for recording companies. In the 1920s, he shifted to New York City as it became a hub for hot music. He assembled bands of friends from New Orleans for OK and Columbia Records, including the seminal Blue Five group, which united a young Louis Armstrong, just emerging as the most innovative soloist in jazz, and Sidney Bechet, who was beginning his long reign as king of soprano saxophone. Williams featured his wife, Eva Tyler, as vocalist on many blues and pop numbers. The important songs he recorded were Cakewalking Babies from Home, Papa Da Da Da, Of All the Wrongs, Cold Card Blues. He also cut a series of washboard band recordings, including numbers from his ill-fated musical comedy Bottomlands, which he promoted in New York and released in 1927. In his long career, Williams' gift for spotting fresh talent and potential musical hits was renowned. Among the first-rate musicians he assembled were trumpeters such as King Oliver, Jabbo Smith, Henry Allen, Ed Allen, Bubber Malley, and Louis Metcalf. He recorded clarinets such as Buster Bailey, Arvil Harris, and Albert Nicholas, and trombonists Charlie Irvis and Ed Cuffey. He was the session piano player on many recordings. For example, he can be heard playing piano on Bessie Smith's classic track Nobody Knows You When You Are Down and Out. But he was most comfortable as a musical director for OK Records and an arranger and composer of jazz and pop tunes. With a fine ear for both novelty jazz material and songs that bridged the gap between pure jazz and pure pop, Williams was an important transmitter of New Orleans traditions to the East Coast musicians he met in his recordings. Williams was an important transmitter of New Orleans traditions to the East Coast musicians he met in his recording and publishing roles. In 1930s, during the squeeze of depression, Williams closed his publishing office, turned to radio promotion, and went on to run an antique store in Harlem. He died in 1965, having sold his vast catalog to Decca Records in 1943. Frank Walker said about him that he was very important in coaching and teaching and working on our new artists. He could somehow manage to get the best out of them, and to this day hasn't received the credit he really deserves. Some of his classic songs are Clarence Wilson's Blue Five, Cakewalking Babies from Home, Everybody Loves My Baby, Kansas City Man Blues, Mandy Make Up Your Mind, Texas Moaner Blues, Wildcat Blues, Cushion Foot Stomp, PDQ Blues, Organ Grinder Blues, Wildflower Rug. You will find all the information and song links related to Clerence Williams in the description box. Gus Cannon. Vocals, banjo, jug, kazoo, fiddle, piano, guitar, from 1885 to 1979. A pioneering bluesman who became a central figure in the Memphis jug band scene, Gus Cannon may have been the first blues recording artist. If tales of music he recorded as early as 1898 are true. However, no documentary evidence of Cannon's recordings has ever been retrieved prior to his Paramount Sides of 1927. Furthermore, if he did record almost 30 years earlier, the music may not have been blues at all, for his repertoire also drew from pre-blues black and white folk and minstrel traditions. Cannon performed as Banjo Joe on medicine shows in the teens and 1920s and recorded his first sides under that name. Inspired by the success of the Memphis Jug Band, Cannon reconfigured his act into Cannon's Jug Stompers and signed with Victor in 1928. Among the Cannon songs reworked by later-day folk revivalists is Walk Right In, which became a #1 pop hit in the US for the Rooftop Singers in 1963. The notoriety enabled Cannon to record an album for Stax Records in 1963, although his participation in the blues revival of the 1960s was limited. Papa Celestin. Trumpets, vocals, from 1884 to 1954. Oscar Papa Celestin was a much-loved New Orleans fixture who started out with the Algiers Brass Band under Henry Allen Sr. at the turn of the century. In 1910, he founded the original Tuxedo Jazz Orchestra with trombonist William Baba Ridley. Celestin recorded with OK and Columbia in the mid-1920s, and his recordings of original Tuxedo Rag and Black Rag stand up well as sizzling hot jazz or dance music in comparison with the recordings that King Oliver made at the time with his Creole jazz band. Unlike many of his peers, Celestin stayed in New Orleans after the glory days of the original Tuxedo Jazz Orchestra. He led bands on Bourbon Street, mid-records, and played regularly for radio broadcasts on a national ABC network show, Dixieland Jambek. He was a sweet-toned trumpeter and a frog-voiced singer, vigorously selling surefire tunes like Little Lisa Jane, Mama Don't Allow, and Bill Bailey. His band featured elders including Alfonso Picao, who played the clarinet, Bill Matthews, who played the trombone, Richard Alexis, who played the bass, and Christopher Black Happy Coldstone, who played the drums. Will Marion Cock. Composer, arranger, and violin player, 1869 to 1944. Will Marion Cook was a highly educated musician, studying at Oberlin Conservatory and the Berlin Hochschule für Musik with virtuoso Joseph Joachim. He also studied briefly with Antonin Dvorak. He worked as a composer with Bob Cole's All-Star Stock Company, a seminal force in early African-American musical comedy production. The group later employed the Johnson brothers, J. Rosamund and James Weldon, to write pioneering all-black musicals such as Shoe Fly Regiment, 1907, and Red Moon in 1909. At this time, African-American musical comedy was performed on and off Broadway, but only fragments or sections were recorded, despite the popularity of many of the shows. Cook dreamed of working with the stellar African-American vaudeville team of Bert Williams and George W. Walker. In 1898, together with poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, he wrote Clorindie, or The Origin of the Cakewalk. This innovative show starred popular singer-composer Ernest Hogan, as well as a cast of 40 singers and dancers. Very successful, Clorindie set a new course for black musicals. This success assured Cook of his dream. He worked for Williams and Walker for more than a decade while continuing to collaborate with Dunbar on In Damohe 1903, In Abyssinia 1906, and In Bandanaland 1908. In 1918, Cook formed a New York or American syncopated orchestra with settings for the new jazz music. In the 1920s, he led clef club ensembles and worked with many important musicians, including pioneer big band leader Fletcher Henderson and singer-actor Paul Robeson. Cook's musical Swing Along, which was released in 1929, displayed his earlier work. Georgia Tom Dorsey, vocals, piano, 1899 to 1993. Thomas A. Dorsey earned his greatest fame as the father of gospel music after leaving his blues career behind in 1932. But in his early days, he was an important blues performer, songwriter, arranger, and studio musician. In his youth in ragtime era, Atlanta and in Chicago, from 1916, Dorsey developed his piano playing skills at barrel houses and rent parties. He also worked with jazz orchestras and Ma Rainey's band before teaming up with Tampa Red in 1928. Dorsey composed songs for the duo as well as material for Ma Rainey and others, and had a special knack for risque double entrande. Ironic for a man best known for his religious classics such as Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Dorsey achieved his greatest success as a music publisher and was founder of the National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses. Despite his stature in religious circles, Dorsey continued to give credit to the blues both as a valid expression of the human condition and as a contributing element in the development and acceptance of gospel music. The Eagle Band, led by B. Bolden, was an extremely popular and influential New Orleans ensemble. Frankie Dawson, or Dawson, 1880 to 1940, a powerful tailgate trombonist, joined the band in 1906 and went on to take over the band when Bolden suffered a mental collapse the following year. Subsequently, Dawson employed various Bolden alumni like Lorenzo Stalls, Brock Mumford, clarinist Frank Lewis, and cornetist Clem. He also chose younger sidemen who became major jazz stalwarts like Bunk Johnson, Joe Oliver, Sidney Bechet, Johnny Dodds, and Big Eye Louis Nelson. Drummers Baby Dodds, Henry Zeno, and Abbey Cheney Foster also played with the band. Dawson was associated with the raggy and bluesy music of Bolden, and in the song Buddy Bolden's Blues, retailed by Jolly Roll Morton in the 1930s to celebrate the Bolden legend. The Eagle Band itself sported a simple and catchy motto: "The Eagles fly high and never lose a feather. If you miss this dance, you'll have the blues forever." Unfortunately for jazz history, Dawson's bands never recorded. Mississippi John Hurt, vocals and guitar, from 1892 to 1966. A songster and finger-picking expert from Avalon, Mississippi, John Hurt excelled in the pre-blues black folk ballad tradition as well as in blues, gospel, and dance instrumentals. He spent most of his life working on farms and entertaining at local parties and functions for both blacks and whites. His first opportunity to record came in 1928 when the white Mississippi fiddle duo of Normer and Smith informed OK Records of a talented black guitar player that they knew. Hurt not only contributed songs such as Candyman and Avalon Blues to the blues canon, but also reinvigorated the folk legends of Casey Jones, Frankie and Albert, and Stack O'Lee. Hurt enjoyed a new career on the folk blues circuit from 1963 until his death, recording several excellent albums and charming festivals and coffee house audiences with his gentle nature and warm and captivating music. Bunk Johnson, trumpet, 1889 to 1949. William Gary Bunk Johnson, a New Orleans trumpeter with good reading and improvising skills, said that he played in Buddy Bolden's pioneer band before 1900s. He was certainly associated with Frankie Dawson and other Bolden cohorts and was famous as a showy lyrical soloist. Johnson's nickname rose from his loquacity, and he was an inveterate self-promoter. He claimed to have mentored Louis Armstrong, among others. He played with Adam Oliver's orchestra in the city and then worked mainly in western Louisiana and on the road with tent shows and other itinerant outfits. Johnson left music in 1933 after an affray in which bandleader Evan Thomas was murdered. He was rediscovered in New Iberia, Louisiana by William Russell and his co-authors of the influential jazzmen among the first serious jazz histories in the late 1930s. After correspondence in which Johnson claimed he could play again if he was equipped with false teeth and a trumpet, Russell and his friends rehabilitated Johnson and set him on the path to a new career with other New Orleans jazz veterans. In the early 1940s, Johnson led bands, recorded steadily for Russell's American Music label, and toured with a long stand in the New York City from 1945 to 46. The band he led continued for decades under the leadership of clarinist George Lewis, exerting a worldwide impact on the jazz revival. His example inspired the jazz revival of ensuing decades as he joined and the pantheon of New Orleans trumpet stars that included Bolden, King Oliver, Louis Armstrong, and others. Struggling with alcoholism, Johnson declined in the late 1940s, leaving one final recording session with the hand-picked band of New York musicians, which shows his personal concept of hot jazz. Tommy Johnson, vocals and guitar. Tommy Johnson, vocals and guitar, from 1896 to 1956. Johnson was a highly influential early blues artist. Due to the impact of his three 1928 records for Victor, which earned him a niche in the Mississippi's first black recording store, Johnson recorded 3 more albums after that for Paramount, plus a few unissued sides. But the songs he recorded for Victor, including Cold Drink of Water, Big Road Blues, Maggie Campbell Blues, and Caned Heat Blues, became entrenched in the repertoires of many bluesmen to follow. Inspired by Charley Patton, Johnson developed a unique approach, employing falsetto accents and hypnotic guitar riffs he learned from an older brother, Lee Dell, who later told folklorist David Evans a tale of Tommy selling his soul to the devil at the crossroads, a story associated today with Robert Johnson. Johnson's reputation as a great bluesman was equaled perhaps only by his notoriety as a drinker, which no doubt contributed to his quick decline. He ceased recording after 1929 and spent his remaining years playing streets and house parties in Mississippi. Sarah Martin, vocals, 1884 to 1955. Martin, an early classic blues singer, was signed by Clerence Williams for OK Records in 1922. While she was a pop-style singer, she was also able to pitch the blues in a rough and ready way. She recorded with Williams-led jazz groups with such illustrious accompaniments as King Oliver and Sidney Bechet. On some sessions, she sang as Margaret Johnson or Sally Roberts. Martin was often accompanied by Thomas Morris and Charlie Irvis, both blues specialists, on the song Death Sting Me Blues, 1928. Martin matches Joe Oliver's intensity, and on the song The Atlanta Blues, 1923, she delivers the old folk melody with great dignity. Her diction was clear, and she had a good ear for plangent blues that were not overworn. In 1929, she appeared on film with immortal Bill Bojangles Robinson in Hello Bill. She left show business in depression and returned to Louisville. New Orleans Rhythm Kings, a band group from 1922 to 25. The New Orleans Rhythm Kings, or NORK, were one of the major white groups in early New Orleans jazz after a run at Chicago's Friars Club in 1922. They recorded with Paul Mayers trumpet, George Brunis trombone, Leon Ropolo clarinet, Jack Pettis saxophone, Lew Black banjo, Steve Brown bass, and Frank Snyder drums. Mayers was a skillful and highly gifted clarinist, Scobell a fine arranger and composer, and Brown a top-flight bassist. Sometime associates were drummer and future band leader Ben Pollock, pianist Mel Stitzel, and others. The NORK's sound was different from the original Dixieland jazz band, with slow blues and relaxed mid-tempo songs that swung. They emulated Joe Oliver's style and recorded some of his music, Sweet Loving Man, for example, some from their book Tiger Rag, and some basic New Orleans song, Maple Leaf Rag. They also recorded standards that are still played, like She's Crying for Me and Angry. In 1923, the NORK made history playing with Jelly Roll Morton on piano to create the first interracial band recording session on sides that included sobbing blues. The original Creole Orchestra, 1912 to 1918. Freddie Keppard's The original Creole Orchestra toured extensively during the teens as an early herbinger of authentic New Orleans jazz, reaching big-time vaudeville's prestigious Orpheum circuit. Powerful pioneer trumpeter Keppard, 1889 to 1933, had with him Creole clarinets like George Beckwith, Big Eye Louis Nelson, and Jimmy Nunn, pioneer bassist Bill Johnson, and multi-instrumentalist Dink Johnson as a drummer. The band created a sensation among vaudeville audiences well before the NORK hit New York. Keppard reputedly refused to record for fear of rival trumpeters stealing his stuff. While the band did not record, Sidney Bucket appropriated a piece of song from the Egyptian fantasy drawn from Abe Ullman's 1910 piano rag Egyptia and recorded the track. The band broke up during the 1918, and Bill Johnson set about finding a replacement for Keppard. After contracting, Johnson settled on King Oliver. Keppard went to Chicago in the 1920s, playing with important orchestras run by Charles Doc Cook. He recorded with Cook Big Band and with a small washboard band, demonstrating hot styles from wah-wah to plunger blues to stirring open horn for startling volume. The original Dixieland Jazz Band, 1917 to 1925. The original Dixieland Jazz or Jazz Band were 5 young white musicians from working class uptown New Orleans: Nick LaRocca, cornet; Larry Shields, clarinet; Eddie Edwards, trombone; Tony Spargo, drums; and Henry Racas, piano. All alumni of Papa Jack Laney's stable of bands. They went to Chicago and then to New York, where their music created a sensation. The word jazz or jazz was not spoken in polite circles, as that was a slang term for sex, but their frantic and wild music made it suddenly acceptable. They disbanded in the mid-1920s but were reunited briefly with ragtimer J. Russell Robinson on piano in 1936, making a short film named March of Time, and making new recordings of songs like Clarinet Marmalade, Skeleton Jungle, and the Dixieland One Step. They also recorded with a large swing band backing them. Daddy Stovepipe, vocals, harmonica, and guitar, 1867 to 1963. Daddy Stovepipe, aka Mobile, Alabama native Johnny Watson, is an obscure figure with only a scattering of recording sessions to his credit, but he represents an important era of blues and pre-blues music. He was not only one of the first down-home blues performers to record in 1924, but his 1867 birth date is the earliest yet documented for any artist in the blues discography. He was in fact decades older than the blues genre itself. His recorded work has much in common with the jug band melodies of Memphis, similarly enhanced by the addition of his wife Mississippi Sarah on vocals and jug band during the 1930s. Watson performed as a one-man band on streets and in medicine shops in Mississippi, Texas, and elsewhere. Before going to Chicago, where he played for Tip on Maxwell Street, he was one of the at least 3 pre-war bluesmen to record using the name Stovepipe, either in reference to the stovepipe hat or a stovepipe used as a musical instrument. That's it for today. From the next video, we will start the story of the jazz and blues in the 1920s. Thank you.